Hello crows and non-crows alike, my name is Joe Mack, otherwise known as Support Crow, and welcome to the Crow Chatter, a series of conversations with some very unique and fascinating individuals about the games we play, the stories we tell, and the challenges we face along the way. I do hope that you enjoy the episode, and if you do, be sure to like and subscribe, but if you don't, it's all good, it ain't nothing to crow about. Regardless, be safe, be well, be kind, and let's get to talking. Hello crows and non-crows alike, my name is Joe Mack, otherwise known as Support Crow, and today I am with Adrian Ropp, aka the former story lead and story artist of Avalanche Software. Adrian, how are you doing today?
I'm great, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing great. Now, for a while now, you've essentially kind of had my dream job, dude. You've been a writer for video games, which is something I find totally cool. But you've done loads more than that. You've worked on comics, trading cards, movies, and certainly a ton of games. But before we get too far into that, there is something, the crows are wanting me to ask you, which Hogwarts house is the best and why is it Ravenclaw?
Sounds like something a Ravenclaw would say.
What? No.
Um, the best house is Hufflepuff, but
Oh.
they would never say it. They would
Hmm.
never tell anybody that because they'd feel bad that they might hurt somebody's feelings.
Oh. That's a very Hufflepuff answer. Well, thank you for joining me. It's been nice having you on the podcast.
Oh, you're welcome.
No,
See you later.
no. You're good. You're good. You're good.
Click.
On a more serious note, or at least as serious as I can be, you've had the privilege to write the quote Unwritten for some of the most magical franchises in modern day storytelling: Disney, Pixar, Star Wars, Marvel, and now, of course, the Wizarding World. Looking back on that, how does that make you feel?
I'm very honored. I feel very blessed that I've been able to do that because these are franchises with characters that are bigger than the sum of their parts. Once Disney or Warner Brothers or any of these other franchises I've worked on make a movie or a game or a comic book or anything like that, it goes out to the audience and it becomes their story and it's no longer our story. And they continue that story by relating it to important events in their life. I've had people come up to me and say like, "Oh, I loved that you worked on this character because when I was little, I would watch these cartoons with my grandpa, and I miss him every day." And so you really have this big responsibility, I think, to not screw up the brand. Like you've got to be a really good steward of the brand so that people can continue to love it and cherish it in the way that they want. Additionally, it's tricky because for example, if you're a Star Wars fan, you know that everybody is very personal about Star Wars and everybody thinks they know exactly how to write Star Wars and how to do it exactly right. And so you're never going to please everybody. And so rather than trying to please everybody, you have to learn how to uh, give them something they didn't know they wanted so that you can sort of avoid that, like that armchair quarterbacking phenomenon that we see these days. But it's really been a huge blessing in my life. Working on a game like Hogwarts Legacy or Disney Infinity. Not only is a dream because I love the franchises, but it helps me pay my bills. I can take care of my family because of it. So it's kind of like a double win for me, and I've just really enjoyed it.
That's awesome, and I can definitely see what you're saying about, it becoming a greater story with the fans, and I've seen it resonate not just with me, but also with plenty of other people.
Even I've drawn Pink Panther for comics, and I get a lot of fans at conventions that don't even speak English because the Pink Panther is he's he's mime basically. He doesn't speak, and so it's like a universal character. Everybody loves the Pink Panther because they all understand his humor. So I have a lot of people that come to my table at conventions when I'm guesting at a convention, and they just fall all over the Pink Panther stuff because it's a way that we can communicate with each other that's not words. It's pretty cool.
Now, you've been credited as something called a story artist. Can you explain exactly what that credit is?
Yeah. So when I began my career, I was actually in animation, and before I went to games, and a story artist is essentially somebody who designs the story with storyboards. So it's sort of a writer artist sort of job. And when I went to work at Disney on Disney games, they understood that verbiage, so I just kept the title when I went there, and I did storyboards and writing for them as well. But the story artists typically in the film world sort of write and draw the the script out so that other people can approve it and take it into production.
I bet it helps with like communication too between departments. Like,
It really does, and for production, it's really helpful. I've actually worked on a couple of projects. I'm not going to tattletale on who did it, but um, that said, you know what, we don't need storyboards. Let's just go right to the animation phase. Well, it's always a humongous mistake to do that. It's a horrible, horrible idea that you should never do. And then I've had to go in and polish up something that wasn't good to begin with because there was no planning involved. So it's a pretty essential job. This coming week, I'm actually going to start teaching a storyboarding class at Salt Lake Community College because it's a definitely important job in production.
that's right. You teaching quite a few courses. You've got the storyboarding class in Salt Lake Community College, which I might see you actually there next year, and you also have your online game writing course at Elevator. That's ELVTR.
Yeah, it's called Become a Game Writer. It's sort of a beginner's course, crash course for what you need to know about uh, writing for video games that's different than just writing because it's a very specific skill. So yeah, and I'm actually I've just found out that we're going to do the course a fifth time in October. So it's a pretty popular course. I think it's one of their most popular courses that they offer actually.
That's pretty cool. And if one of the listeners just wanted to like look up on that, do they just need to like find Elevator like on the web, or is there like a specific place that they kind of house all the?
Yeah, just go to their website, which it's elevator with that's spelled different. So it's elvtr.com. And you can find my course there and click a link, and then you can talk to them about signing up if you want to. Certainly always happy to make new friends that way.
I might definitely consider that one. But how did you come about becoming a game writer? Like, did you always plan to write for games, or did you just happen to, or were you like kind of already working in that sphere of influence?
When this is kind of a long story, but when I was 6 years old, my grandparents took me to see The Jungle Book in the theaters, and that was back in the day when movies weren't on DVD or video or anything like that. The Disney movies would come back to theaters every 7 years or so. And so when I was six, The Jungle Book happened to premiere, and that was the first time in my lifetime that it was available. So my grandparents took me to see it, and I came home with little stars in my eyes. I pretty much had anime eyes the entire film, and I decided at 6 years old, I don't know how you do that for a living, but that's what I want to do with my life. And I thought it was animation. I thought I wanted to be the animator that acted out the characters and did all that sort of stuff. And so when I started school at uh, in St. George, Utah, in college, it used to be called Dixie College, but now it's called Utah Tech. Um, I I got a job with an animation studio down there as an office assistant, and my boss started like looking over my pencil tests on Saturdays and things like that, and I really liked being an animator, but I was really kind of obsessed with story, and he was a storyboard artist. And the more I found out about the storyboard artist, the more I realized that what I actually loved was story. It wasn't doing the animation. So he kind of trained me to be a storyboard artist. I worked on a couple of films. There was an animated musical called The Princess and the Pea, which no one has ever seen because it's only offered through the specific company that funded it. And then I also directed the animation for Velveteen Rabbit, which has been on Netflix and things like that. So I just realized I love story more than I loved animating because the story artists can actually tell the animators what they're going to do, and you kind of manipulate the audience to feel emotions in a way that's a little more significant than the animators can. So I my wife is from Utah. My family's in Idaho, and so living in Utah, we were only about 3 hours away from all the family we needed to be around, and it was kind of nice because we have a lot of family things going on here, and eventually the animation work dried up, and I didn't want to move to California because we really wanted to stay near our family, but then I found out that Disney Interactive had a studio in Salt Lake, and so I applied there. I had a friend that worked there that kind of vouched for me, and I just made the leap over to games. And honestly, the first 6 months of working on games were really painful for me because there is a big difference in how you approach story between film and games. And I had about a 6 month learning curve where I had to get really battered and bruised about how that works before I really got it. Now I feel really comfortable in that space. And, I've always loved video games and I've always loved story. And I realized that um, video games are just a tool to tell a story. So it's like, okay, you can have a blue pencil or a mechanical pencil or a brush pen, and they're all going to help you how to do art, but they're just different ways to do it. And as soon as I figured out what the secret ingredient was in writing stories for games, I was really happy with that. So I've I've made a good living for little over 17 years of my 30-year career working in the games industry. And it wasn't where I was originally expecting to go, but I'm very happy with it. I don't really have any designs on getting out of the industry. Um, it's just a lot of fun for me.
Are you comfortable saying what the secret ingredient to writing for video games is here, or are you going to keep that for your elevator class?
I mean, it's part of the elevator class, but I'll give you a little nugget.
Go for it.
Um, the difference is in film, you're asking the audience to follow you along on an adventure, and you get to control and manipulate their emotions by making the protagonist character do whatever you want them to do. In games, you have to allow the audience to be one of the writers. You have to let them have some authority on the choices that are made in the game so that it can become their story. That's really the secret to it.
Eventually, you'd also be credited as something called a story lead. I'm assuming that means that you lead a group of writers. How does that dynamic work exactly? Like, are you working on individual things or?
Lead writer means that you are or lead story artist. That just means that you're at a place in your career where you're a little bit above a senior title, and so they deem that your value is that of something higher than senior. So lead is the step up from senior in promotional levels. Usually, it means that you are taking more of an active role of helping the younger writers and artists get better at their job. You take more management responsibility. A lot of times that means you're going to be forward facing uh, to stakeholders and franchises and things like that. That's all that means. It doesn't. I was also the head of the department, so I actually just had 14 direct reports that answered to me, and I'd have to delegate work out and stuff. But that wasn't because I was the lead writer. It was just because I was the head of the department. So the lead title in games usually just is a title jump when you're getting promoted over time, and those titles aren't really important to me as a status symbol. But they are important to the company to say like, here's the value we place in you, and so it's important to know what the titles are. But that's basically what it means.
Gotcha, gotcha. Well, I'm coming from like a factory setting, so like team member, team leader, team supervisor, these are like ranks and steps on a ladder here. So would it be accurate to say that, senior lead and whatnot in the gaming industry is more based on like proficiency? Or
Yeah, that's true. It's very true.
I get writer's block all the time. Do video game writers also get writer's block? And if so, how do y'all take care of that and maintain the momentum with the rest of the team?
Yeah, we absolutely do. I mean, every writer gets writer's block. I don't think I've ever met a writer, whether it be novels, screenwriting, any copywriting for commercials, any kind of writer can get writer's block. And unfortunately, there isn't a silver bullet to that. Like, it's pretty personal. You have to figure out like, why am I blocked? Is it because I don't enjoy the work I'm doing? Is it because I'm not feeling inspired? Am I having anxiety because I have imposter syndrome? There's a lot of reasons. What I personally do is I give myself the opportunity to set the work aside and go do something that just brings me joy, just to reset my brain a little bit. If I stop thinking about the problem I'm trying to solve with the story for a significant amount of time, I can usually come back to it fresh and uh, and unblock myself. What does that look like? I think the most common thing I do is if I'm sitting at home and it's the afternoon and I'm typing away and I'm like, oh, man, I cannot unlock this problem. Sometimes I'll just like go on my phone and is like, hey, what's playing at the movie theater? Because I live about 2 minutes away from a movie theater. I'll just go see a matinee and then I'll just come back and jump right back into it. It's part of the advantage I have right now of working from home.
So as I said, you're not only a leading industry leading game writer, you're also a comic artist and a writer of comics, such as Archie, Pink Panther, Rocky and Bullwinkle, The Three Stooges. How have you enjoyed working on these comics, and where can we find these wonderful productions of yours?
Well, sadly, I think the things I'm most famous for are Underdog and the Pink Panther, and they've been out of print now for about 5 years. So it's getting really, really hard to find anything with them. But they have a Pink Panther Volume 1 trade that collects all the issues, and an Underdog Volume 1. You can still, I think, get on Amazon. It has my work in it. Additionally, yeah, I do a smattering of work for Archie. I I used to do more of these, but I would do the cover gags on the digest that you see in the supermarket checkout stands. I do the jokes for those covers, and I did an issue where I drew a story in a Little Archie special, Fun with Little Archie and Friends. And then I also did an Indiana Jones spoof I wrote last year. It's called Archie's uh, Summer Movie Hits. I think that's the title. I think both of those you can find on the archiecomics.com website.
I think I'll have to hunt down that Indiana Jones one.
Yeah, it was actually their best-selling book last year, which was cool. So last year I had the best-selling Archie book and I worked on the best-selling video game, which was kind of a banner year
Yeah,
for me.
that's pretty good.
Yeah, you don't get that very often. But honestly, like I feel like I've been really lucky in my games career because I've been able to like have lightning strike twice with Disney Infinity and Hogwarts Legacy. Both of those became cultural phenomenons, and my main job was just like don't screw it up. Make just honor the legacy of the brand, and if you can do that, it's going to be successful. So they're both those like products where when you'd announce them, they people would comment back with that meme of Fry from Futurama saying "Shut up and take my money." Like both of those were such no-brainers as far as like, do the fans want this? And you didn't have to convince anybody that they wanted it because they just did. And then of course the Archie comic was the best-selling Archie comic last year, but it doesn't hurt that it actually came out the same week as the Indiana Jones movie. Like probably that was probably more of a masterstroke from Archie Publishing than it was from anything I did. But it was still a really fun story.
If you could choose a favorite moment from your career, what would it be?
My gosh, after 30 years, it's hard to like narrow it down to one moment. But let me think for a second. I think the I think the happiest moment I ever had was on Disney Infinity 3.0 because I was the story director for the Star Wars content and um, recording the actors, the film actors for The Force Awakens. I got to direct those recording sessions, and I think that might have been the moment where I thought I am living my dream. I'm absolutely living my dream. There's been so many like little moments like that. I have if you were in my office, you could see behind my monitor. I have photos and photos and photos of all the people I've met at conventions that come up to me and say, Disney Infinity is still my family's favorite game. And you have to remember, it's been canceled for almost 10 years now, and people are still playing it on their old platforms. And they come up and say, we still play Disney Infinity every day. We have all the figures, and they'll bring in figures for me to sign. And I always take pictures with them because it means something to them. They care about it. They were, I mean, I lost my job when they laid us all off at Disney, but they lost something important to them too. And it reminds me like to get out of my head a little bit and not feel selfish because the game means something to other people, not just the people that were making a living doing it. So I have a lot of moments like that. At one point, I don't know. Do you know what the 501st Legion is?
I'm blanking on it.
Okay, so I'll let you off the hook. The 501st Legion is an officially sanctioned charity organization where um, people make screen accurate stormtrooper and other villain costumes, and they go around doing events like Make a Wish and things like that to raise money for charity. And the only way you can get into the 501st in two ways. You can either make a screen accurate costume that gets judged as appropriate, and they let you into their fold, or you can become an honorary member by working on Star Wars products. Well, I actually had an experience about 4 years ago where I was doing a panel at Salt Lake Comic Con, and suddenly stormtroopers walked in, and they actually inducted me as an honorary member into the 501st. And my nieces and nephews happened to be there that day, so I'm like the coolest uncle ever because stormtroopers came up to me and said, "Yeah, you want to be a stormtrooper?" Gave me a big plaque, and there was a whole presentation. It was really cool. So that's a highlight for me too. But in a career that I feel has been more filled with highlights than not, it's really hard for me to pick one moment and say that was the moment where I was living my dream. I got to I got to record Mickey Mouse for Disney Infinity. That was always a fantastic dream of mine. I got to direct the Avengers playset and co-direct the Guardians of the Galaxy playset, and those were both fantastic, like fanboy fantasies of mine. And so I just feel like I've been super lucky throughout my career. It's been a career of happy moments for me.
That's awesome. And I'll definitely have to look into the 501st charity organization.
They're pretty awesome. They do a lot of good work. But when I got into it, my dad said, "Well, who else is an honorary member?" And I said, "Oh, nobody. Like George Lucas, John Williams, Mark Hamill. Just normal people like me."
Just normal people. So, 16 years of your career, you've been at Avalanche Software, right?
Yes.
And this is a studio that's recently received massive success. And seems to be gearing itself up for a very promising future. When I saw your tweet that you were leaving, I was very surprised. I guess my question is why now when the fruit's like ripening on the vine? Why now?
Um, about 2 years ago, I actually found out I was in kidney failure, and I was having a lot of health problems, and they couldn't figure it out. And they actually found out, like, oh, you're actually going to die because your kidneys are dying, and all of my family was um, disqualified as donors, and I could not find a donor anywhere. And they told me at one point, like, you have maybe like 6 months left to live. And I started advocating around to find a donor, and I was not having any success at all. And then finally, after going through the whole horrible idea of like talking to my wife about planning my funeral and what she was going to do when I was gone, because she has some disabilities and I'm the primary caregiver of the family, and realizing that I've spent so much of my life working and not living, and now it was almost over. And I actually got just a last minute. They tell me that it was probably about 6.5 weeks is all I had left when I actually got a donor at the last minute, and it saved my life, and it brought me back from literally the dead. And it when you go through an experience like that, it changes your perspective on pretty much everything in the world. So I there's a lot of personal reasons that I'm not going to get into about why I decided that moment to leave. There was, you know, but things that weighed in that balance were, my health and happiness, and where I saw myself going in life, and how I wanted the rest of my time on the earth to go. And I realized that I had kind of just come to an inevitable point where that that studio just didn't quite make sense for me anymore. I have no animosity towards them at all. They all treated me well, and I have a lot of friends that will still work there and stuff. But it just wasn't a good fit for me anymore, and so I had to be really brave with that decision, because this is a really hard time to be in the games industry unemployed. A lot of people are losing their jobs, and getting a new job is really hard to come by. So I decided that my special power is getting approvals on brands that people love, and so I've decided, you know what, I just would like to be sort of a contract person that consults people on getting brand approvals for things. It's turned out to be a really positive thing for me. If I was only going to look at it the way that you were, kind of set it up for me, which is like they made a ton of money and it looks really stable, and they're probably going to make a ton more money. If that was the thing that I was deciding, using to decide where I wanted my life to go, I would absolutely still be there, because money is a big draw. But I don't think I'm just not there anymore. I that isn't the thing that interests me. I like new challenges. I like working with brands that I love so much, and I had to make a decision that money wasn't going to be my motivating factor anymore. So it was totally scary, and I'm so grateful that my wife supported the decision. But it just the writing was just kind of on the wall for me that my personal journey was going to take me in another direction.
I mean, yeah, you can't put a price tag on what makes you happy, right?
No, I spent most of my career chasing, like, okay, if I work here, then I can get promoted, then I can get promoted, then I can get promoted. So I was always chasing that carrot a little bit, and I actually don't like. I'm a different human being than I was before my transplant. I don't really feel the need to chase that carrot anymore. I just want to work on things that have value, where I think I can be of influence, and I can use my talents to make something better than it would be.
That sounds like a level of freedom that is extremely admirable.
I mean, we'll see. A year from now, I might be posting on social media, please somebody hire me. I'm desperately hungry. I haven't paid my mortgage in 2.5 months. Yeah, but I feel good about it. I think it was the right decision for me.
I've got a feeling you'll be fine. On the point of kind of where the industry is right now, more than 20,000 developers have been laid off since the start of 2023. At least 30 studios have closed down. Bungie just recently laid off 200 some people. BioWare is going to be releasing their Dragon Age game in a couple months from now, but a couple months from the start of the year, they laid off like 50 people. Some of those people have been there for decades. I've seen a lot of perspectives and opinions on this, especially on Twitter, from the outside looking in. What's your perspective on this as someone that's been on the inside looking out?
The thing you have to remember about games industry is when a new studio comes online and they think, we're going to make an amazing game and people are going to love it and give us a lot of money for it. That's not a good enough game plan. What you actually have to do is think, how is my game going to be so good and so enticing that they're going to stop buying God of War or Call of Duty and buy my game instead? People have a finite amount of money to spend on video games. And if you want to get a new customer to look at your product, you're going to have to convince them not to buy something that they already are a big fan of. And so while people were releasing a lot of great product, they weren't really doing the work to like get people to leave other industries. And the industry can only grow so much before it's just a glut of studios, right? So um, it's a difficult thing to answer, but I think when it comes down to it, there was too much content being delivered and not enough consumer, and so the it made it really hard for people to sustain their business. I think also probably more studios should have looked at hiring people on contract rather than full time, because then when they had to do layoffs, they had to lay off so many people rather than just letting contracts expire. They could have contracted a little bit. But I see it everywhere. Like, it's not just games. I mean, you may have seen the news articles. Pixar just laid off a significant amount of their workforce, and they're a really successful studio. But they had the unfortunate strategy from Disney that they were going to put several of their movies direct to Disney Plus rather than putting them in theaters, and it finally caught up to them. And I have a lot of really good friends at Pixar that have worked there since like Toy Story, the original Toy Story, and they lost their jobs because they couldn't sustain it anymore. So I've seen this happen in the industry over and over and over. It's very cyclical. It will recover. I think people just need to be patient. The people that are good, the people that are passionate about working, they will be okay. The people that feel more entitled or not really like trying every day to improve themselves and find employment, they're going to be the ones that suffer a little bit, and I think they're going to have a harder time. But I've lived through three of these sorts of like mass layoff events in my career. So I guess they happen around every 10 years or so, if I'm doing the math right. But it all recovers. It's not ever a permanent problem. It's always a temporary problem.
Well, that's a good thing, at least.
Yeah.
Is that if there was like a lesson to learn from this, would the lesson be, if you're a game developer, just have like an Easter egg stashed to the side just in case
I
the
mean,
bad times come?
that's never a bad idea, right? But I think, for example, your skills can translate to other industries. If you tell yourself the only story that you're allowed to have for your career is that you're going to have only video game work up until you retire, you're probably going to have a problem. But look what I do. I've worked in animation, I've worked in comics, I've worked in video games. Pivot when the industry changes, pivot with the change. Find ways to stay working and stay relevant. And if you can get a job as a copywriter rather than a video game writer, do that for a while. Like, just your skills will translate into other mediums. Video games are have many disciplines involved with them. Like I know people that left the video game industry to go work at another software company because they were a programmer, or they went to work in animation because they were a concept artist, and it just translates really nicely. And so as long as you can kind of let go of the ego of I want to tell the story that I just worked my way up through games and I always had a job in games, you can you can usually stay employed. I mean, no offense meant to anybody that's struggling with that, even though they're trying, because sometimes it doesn't quite work that well. But if you're able to pivot with the industry changes, you'll be more successful than those who don't know how to adjust. I was in the animation industry when Toy Story changed everything. I was doing hand drawn animation, and I know a lot of guys that were getting older in their career. That I'm probably the age they were. I'm basically I'm turning 50 in October, and so I'm about the age that they probably were when that change happened. And the ones that survived were the ones that learned how to use the computer generated tools, and the ones that floundered were the ones that resisted it. That said, no, I'm not going to learn how to do that because I like my art the way I like my art. And they never got work again, or they just got tiny amounts of work. So it's just really important to watch the industry. When my elevator students ask me how to stay employed when the industry can be so volatile, I always say don't be Walden Books. I don't know if you remember Walden Books. She used to be in like every mall in America, and the digital revolution happened when the online stores happened, and they did not react to the change in the market, and they're gone now. So, yeah, it's just a matter of like paying attention to what's going on, watch the trends, and be prepared for those trends.
I remember my old college professor saying something along the lines of that. It was back in around 2014, and there was this whole like debate about whether or not there's going to be like whether or not things are going to crash, and doom and gloom is going to befall everyone. And he said basically what you're saying along the lines of, if there's a the industry isn't going to crash, it's going to change, and you need to learn how to pivot with the change.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, let's get on to something a bit more happy, shall we?
Sure.
So nowadays, everyone and their brother is talking about like Hogwarts Legacy this and Hogwarts Legacy that. But before Hogwarts Legacy, you worked on Disney Infinity,
Hmm.
a action adventure multiplayer toys to life game where you unlock characters by purchasing physical merchandise. A really cool concept that became very popular very quickly. Can you tell us more about how that project came to be for you?
Yeah. So for the consumer, it got announced as a Toys to Life game, and everybody, you know, said, I want that very much. And it was just an immediate success that way. But for the developer, it wasn't that way at all. We originally didn't start out as a Toys to Life game. It was a lot more just like, okay, we're going to do smaller adventures that the player can buy with different stories. Like we had a Toy Story in Space game that never changed. That became one of our play sets when we finally shipped. But there was a lot of sort of R&D and a lot of development work because while our games were really successful, and Toy Story 3 was probably our biggest success as a game because it was more of like a sandbox game where people could do a lot of different things and explore with their imagination, and we'd give them things to pay it off. Um, while our games were really successful, and even for being kids games, they were pretty well acclaimed. Um, Disney Interactive was struggling, and we were trying to do something bold to try to help the company recover from a struggle that they were having. Um, there's always a really just a side note, like there's always a big problem you have when you work for a big corporation who has shareholders, because it can come down to, oh, you know what, the games industry gives the shareholders a 13% profit on their shares, but the parks industry gives them a 14% profit on their shares. Well, let's just shut down the games industry then and put all the money in parks because they want 1% more. Walt Disney would have never done that. He would have seen the value in getting through the tough times with the artists and maintaining the success, but it comes down to a numbers game anymore. So we were kind of in a place where we were trying to save our jobs. We wanted to do something big and bold so that we could save the jobs, and the Toys to Life model was getting popular then with Skylanders, and so we decided that we were going to go for that. But before we started doing the Toys to Life, we had a lot of development. We were toying around with a Frankenweenie playset. One of my friends had done a really awesome Wreck-It Ralph playset with a Sugar Rush race course in it. Um, we were going all over the place, but when we finally released as a Toys to Life game, we had gotten John Lasseter to agree to champion us if we could design all of the characters to look like they belong to one toy brand so that they could intermingle with each other. Because otherwise, none of the franchises were going to play nice with us. They didn't, you know, Mickey and Woody don't talk to each other. But when they're from the same toy line, you can tell the story that these are toys of these characters. In Woody's case, he's a toy of a toy. But because they're all from the same toy line, they all recognize each other and understand who each other is and everything. So that was the hardest part of the process. And then figuring out which characters we were going to actually make as the figures and I was kind of involved in it wasn't ultimately my decision, but I made a very big advocate case that every boy that plays our game is going to have like a little sister or a girl that's going to want to play the game as well. So why not just do the smart thing and have the playsets packaged so that they ship with a male character and a female character? And because I felt like we needed to get more female characters in our game because I knew girls were gonna love Disney Infinity, and they were becoming a very dominant force in gaming that hadn't really been considered very well for years and years and years. So I was really proud of that. So they Jesse and Holly Sheftwell and I think Mrs. Incredible. We couldn't call her Elastigirl for some reason, and I'm sure it was legal. But that's why so many playsets shipped with a male character and a female character, is so that we could get those female characters in the starter pack, so that a girl could buy the game and have just as much fun if she wanted to be the girl character. Of course, she can be the boy character if she wanted to. So we had a lot of discussions about that and what playsets were we going to make, and we ended up finding out that Disney was going to support us better if we aligned with content that they were trying to promote already. And so most of our playsets ended up being based on movies that were upcoming or or franchises that were already strong but they wanted a little bit a boost for. So I think that first Disney Infinity we had Toy Story in Space, The Incredibles, which was a franchise that they didn't necessarily have a movie coming up for at that time, but they felt like they needed to strengthen the brand a little bit so they could get more merchandising dollar out of it. Lone Ranger, which was an upcoming film, which I think a lot of people still even now think, well, that was kind of a strange choice, but that's because there was a movie coming out and they were trying to promote. Pirates of the Caribbean, which is kind of an evergreen title for them, and Monsters University, which I directed that playset. Cars, which I directed as well, and then what was the other one? Seems like there was one more. I'll remember after we're done, and it will drive me bananas, and I will feel bad about it. But there's the 6 play sets in the original Infinity, and we had 5 people in the story department, so that's why I ended up directing too, because we only got one story person per play set, and we had about 11 months to make an entire game of each of them, and it was a breakneck speed. And I remember when we announced it, and the internet broke because everybody was so excited about it, and even PvP, the comic strip, even did like a Disney Infinity joke on one episode, which was really cool. And it was an answer on Jeopardy once, which was pretty cool too. So, but that was kind of the evolution of the product. It didn't start out Toys to Life, but once we figured out Toys to Life was going to work and how we would be able to monetize with the toys rather than with the game, it made a lot more sense. And I think it was a really fun and innovative product.
This was a game that combined intellectual properties from different sources. Like, was it challenging trying to bring those characters together because they were from different places?
Absolutely. Um, it so it was like an 80% challenge when it was Disney and Pixar. It was a 90% challenge when it was Marvel, Disney, and Pixar, and it was a 100% challenge when it was Star Wars, Marvel, Pixar, and Disney. And because every time we added a franchise that wasn't known for interacting with the other characters, they were very concerned that we were going to do something damaging to their brand. And we didn't want to do that at all. So, um, we'd have to get them on board, get them to trust us a lot. We'd have a lot of meetings where we'd say like, okay, here's what we're going to do. And that's why the toy box was the only place where the characters would intermingle with, because the idea of the toy box was it was a literal toy box where you take all the toys and you could do whatever you wanted, and there wasn't a defined story or narrative that would that would guide you along on a journey. So, but even in our advertising, like Marvel characters had to be in a different plane on the screen than the Disney characters. They couldn't interact with each other. If you watch on YouTube the old commercials for Disney Infinity, you'll notice like if the Disney characters are in the foreground, then the Marvel characters are like mid ground behind them. They don't interact with each other, and we had to get everybody really comfortable with it. Marvel also didn't want us to use their movie versions of their characters. They wanted us to use the animation versions of the characters because the person in charge was um, fairly concerned that it was going to cheap or it was going to make the movie brand feel more juvenile if we did that. And so all of the Marvel characters in our game use the animation voices and they have more of the animation stylization to it. But honestly, I think the way we approached the story was we tried to make it feel like those were actually movie characters, and I think everybody bought it. And then, we added Star Wars, and then we had other challenges like, you know what, Marvel has superheroes and Star Wars has Jedi, and it was really important to delineate that a Jedi isn't a superhero and a superhero isn't a Jedi. And so you had to be really careful with that system too. The big win that we had that nobody ever got to see was in Disney Infinity 4.0. We actually got approval finally from all the franchises to mix the characters together in brand new, unique stories. And we were doing a lot of test work on that. I remember working with one developer on a Spider-Man scene where Spider-Man had Yoda in a backpack and Yoda was directing him through web slinging through New York City. Like there was a lot of things like that where we were actually finally able to mix them into brand new unique stories.
That would have been awesome.
Yes, it would have. I'm very sad that Disney Infinity 4.0 never happened. And honestly, if the market could have sustained the toy sales, we'd probably still be making it now. I think Dreamlight Valley is probably a really good sign that it's something people still want quite a bit.
Oh, definitely. I don't play Dreamlight Valley, but I know quite a few people who absolutely love the game.
There's an appeal. These are all characters you love, and you want to have new adventures with them. And it's just like going to a Disney theme park. There, you see all the characters you love, and so there's a definite appeal to it. And just especially after Toys R Us went out of business, I don't think we could have sustained the business after that.
Hmm. In a way, it's kind of like bringing the theme park home to you, in a way.
Oh, absolutely. I hope this doesn't sound blasphemous to anybody, but I've always considered myself to be an Imagineer. And if you read Marty Sklar, the head of Imagineering, had a really good book called one little spark where he talks about Mickey's Ten Commandments and how they approach doing theme park attractions. And there's nothing different about the way they do that than the way that we were making video games. So this is a double plug. First, for me being an Imagineer, and second, you should buy that book if you are interested in Imagineering.
Totally. I'll definitely put it on the book list. So, what was your favorite character to work with?
Oh, it's always going to be Mickey. I got to play with Sorcerer Mickey. He's
Oh
like the
yeah.
gold standard of the company. They don't let people have access to Sorcerer Mickey unless it's something very special. And I got to write his lines and I got to do the voice direction on his session, and we got to work him into a lot of product, but that was just a dream come true. Mickey's my man. He's plucky, he's determined. He never takes an easy path when there's a right path. He's just this morally good character, and I love him to death. I'm the world is divided into people who like Mickey more and people who like Donald more, and I'm definitely in the Mickey camp.
I think I might slightly like Donald more purely because he's in Kingdom Hearts. But I have to
Well,
deal with him and his healing or lack of
I
healing.
mean, technically Mickey's in Kingdom Hearts too, but
True, true, but I don't see him as often.
if you get a really good therapist over time, I think you'll realize that Mickey's a better character.
All right, well, we're gonna put
You
that
just,
to the side for now.
yeah, you just need to work on your anger issues and you'll be fine.
That's fair, but anyway, if you continued Disney Infinity today, what characters would you love to introduce?
Oh my gosh. I sometimes post on Twitter like, if we were making Disney Infinity today, we probably would have made this character. When the Haunted Mansion movie came out last year, I said, you know what? If we were still making Disney Infinity, you'd have a Hatbox figure by now. But one of the most exciting properties to me would have been Elemental. I think those characters would have been fantastic game characters, and I spent hours just imagining what we could have done with those characters in a game. It would have been one of the most imaginative play sets I think we would have done. Um, Pretty much every time a Disney movie comes out, the first thing I do is think, what could we have done with this character? What could we have done with this character? Um, and every time one of the live action remakes comes out, I think, how could we have convinced Disney to let us do the animation version of this character rather than the live action version of the character, which we actually succeeded on with Baloo, because the Baloo figure was released at the same time as the live action Jungle Book, and we fought really hard to have the animated Baloo be the character that got put in our game, and we actually convinced them to let us. So I'm very proud that that happened. But yeah, we would have had Jiminy Cricket and Goofy for sure, because that was coming in Infinity 4.0. I think we would have had a myriad of more Star Wars characters and Marvel characters. We were working on. We were finally in pre-production on releasing a Hera figure for Rebels because she was the only one that got left out of the loop on that. And we were doing a Rogue One playset with Jin and Cassian and K2SO, which looked really cool. Um, and Baz and Charut. I think there was 5 characters we were doing there. I think we probably would have done Mandalorian for sure.
Probably, yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah. Uh, which wouldn't have been hard, honestly, because you just had to take the animation sets from Boba Fett and apply them to a new character. It would have been okay. Um, I think I think most of the Marvel characters we actually kind of got. I'm really sad that Spider Gwen never came out. That would have been really cool. I would have loved to have seen a Spider-Man 2099 because I used to read that comic when I was a kid, and that would have been kind of a dream come true for me. Um, Shang-Chi probably would have made an appearance. I think he would have been, the Marvel characters were always great because in video games, if you can get a character in that can do combat, it's a huge win for interactivity. Um, But yeah, I don't know. I really, 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 really would have hoped that we could have done figures for X-Men 97. I know somebody did those as a fan, and they looked really nice actually, but I really would have liked to have seen those in the game.
I would have liked to see some Spider-Man Noir.
Yeah, that would have been cool too. I mean, what it came down to is like, how many people do we suspect are going to buy this? And if we could convince them that the answer was a lot, then they would
Mm-hmm.
approve the figure. That was, I spent my entire time on Disney Infinity advocating to make Darkwing Duck a figure, and they just never quite believed that he was popular enough to deserve a figure. But I disagree on that front. I think he would have been a fantastic figure in the game.
Was Merlin from Sword in the Stone? I got your art print of him, by the way. I'm still waiting on the
Oh
frame.
yeah,
But was he ever on the board for
he
consideration?
was in the game as a just an NPC character.
Oh, he was?
I yeah, the Raceway game in 3.0.
Mm-hmm.
He was in the cinematics at the beginning of that game. Or no, it was the villain. It was the villain's takeover game. Yeah, but he's actually in the game.
Oh, dang.
But I doubt he would have got a figure. I don't think he would have been seen as being marketable enough for merchandise.
Well, that hurts, but okay.
That's why we had power discs. So we could like, well, you could have things like Madame Medusa's Swamp Mobile because Madame Medusa as a character wasn't ever gonna be popular enough in their eyes from the consumer products eyes to make a figure. But the power discs were, a $5 investment on a little disc, and people would buy that. And it kind of like got to scratch the itch of your fandom a little bit more. So we got out a lot of our frustration on characters that they wouldn't approve through the power discs.
It seemed like Disney Infinity and other games in that Toys to Life genre were vastly popular between 2014 and 2016. There wasn't a time where I couldn't like go through like Target or Walmart without something pointing me in that direction. But then it all just sort of like vanished all of a sudden. From your perspective, kind of what happened there?
Well, we flooded the market. I mean, when we got laid off at that point on that day, Disney Infinity was outselling Lego Dimensions and Skylanders combined 2 to 1. They were they were killing the market. Like they owned the market. But we produced way too many toys. So we had all this overhead of these toys and they weren't moving as fast as they needed them to move because we made too many of them. Like when you get to the point where everybody that owned the character would have to buy two of them in order for us to make money, that you've overproduced the toys. And the market was changing, and like I said, Toys R Us was going out of business, and the big retailers were getting harder and harder to work with to get enough space in the store for us to make money. And when it comes to that point where you realize we're spending so much money on this game that we have to sell this many toys, um, a lot of decisions were starting to be discussed, like how can we make the toys cheaper? And nobody wanted that. Like who neither Avalanche or the consumer wanted the toys to be cheaper because the toys were like the kind of the gold standard of the franchise. People would buy the toys and not the game. So um, the market just sort of shifted. We didn't really shift well to stay on top of it, and just kind of paid the price for it. But if you look at it now, like we were out of business, but Lego Dimensions soon followed, and then Skylanders as well. I think the Toys to Life model didn't quite work right anymore. I think Disney Infinity could easily come back without the toys as a subscription based thing, or just digital only. And well, I think it's available digital only, but you could continue it that way. But I think the Toys to Life kind of had played out a little bit.
If there was something you could change about Disney Infinity back then, would that be something you'd consider?
Oh yeah, there's always little things that I wished I could have had more influence on. And I think everybody was doing their very best, and there's a lot of reasons that I'm not even aware of that certain decisions happened, and it was usually because they were being forced to be made, and we had to play nice with everybody at the studio if we wanted to use the characters, right? So, but one thing that I really, really wish we would have done differently is I actually would have replaced Captain Barbosa with Elizabeth Swann. I think her as a character would have been a fresher take on the playset than Captain Barbosa, and it would have like scratched that itch a little bit better. She was a great character, but and the other big thing, like that's a kind of a cosmetic thing for me, but the biggest thing I wish we could have changed is we had some of the world's most talented developers working on that game, and we were only getting at most 11 months to do an entire game. And that is like, to give you an example, Hogwarts Legacy took almost 8 years. So to get 11 months to make a fantastic immersive game with a staff that was just basically a skeleton crew, it was murder on our work life balance. It was absolutely awful. We did it because we loved the property, but if we could have been given, you know, 2 years between releases to make better games, it would have been it would have been much welcomed. I mean, I think we released really good games, but I can't even imagine how much polish we could have put on them if we would have had another year of development.
So were you working with Disney and Avalanche? Can you clear that up for me?
So
Like,
so Avalanche was owned by Disney.
gotcha. Okay, understood.
And then when they laid us off, they were no longer owned by Disney, so we needed a new studio to own us. And so then we made a pitch to Warner Brothers and they picked us up.
Oh, okay. I thought Warner Brothers came to y'all.
It was there might have been interest there, but I was actually involved in the pitching. Like, here's why our studio makes sense, and you know, a few of us actually during our layoff time spent some sweat equity, kind of making that deal happen.
Gotcha. So it wasn't really a matter of, well, I mean, I guess you did find out that you were going to be working on a Wizarding World game when they said, "Yeah, go ahead and do it." But
Yeah, yeah.
well, how did you feel when you got that confirmation?
I mean, that was exciting because I'm a huge Harry Potter fan, and I loved it, and we've already proven our abilities with franchise, that we can do a franchise project and give it the love it deserves so that people were going to love it. Um, I didn't feel that we would fail. Like that's the exciting thing when you're like, yeah, we've proven this is the space where we belong. We're gonna do a good job. And it's just a matter of like, are they gonna give us enough time and resources to do the job that we need to do? That's the only scary part. So I was excited because, it's another brand that I love. I don't want to ruin that brand. I love it so much. Now, as much as I love that brand, I mean, Disney Infinity is always going to be my favorite thing I ever worked. I That was such a dream job for me because I am such a huge Disney nut. It's insane how much of a Disney kid I am. But and I had to mourn quite a bit when we lost that job because that was my dream was to work at Disney my entire life. And then when it was over, I had to figure out what my new dream was because I'm like, I didn't have a step two for this. But Harry Potter is beloved for really good reasons. It's a worldwide phenomenon, and I was so excited to get a chance to play in that universe and do some exciting and innovative things.
Well, it's good. You could say that you at least started working on something, a different kind of magic in a manner of speaking.
I mean, yeah, it's different, right? You have to understand the brand well, but it's different, but it's fantastic. And J.K. Rowling has done an amazing job of setting up the rules in her universe about how things work and why things work and what's forbidden and what's not forbidden. And Yeah, she did her homework on setting up a universe with some really amazing opportunities in it.
Now, narratively speaking, speaking about the universe, were there any important elements that you and the team felt like you had to nail down?
Yeah, there's quite a few actually. Like there's some tent poles to that brand that were really important, such as there's a couple of like um mission statements they have, like you're stronger together than you are alone, and do doing what is right versus what is easy. Those were important for us as a narrative team. But additionally, we had a really strong desire to like introduce people to a world that they were familiar with, but in a way they weren't expecting, and to make it feel authentic. Um, Wand use should feel like the hand motions should be um, authentic to what we know about the movies and the books. And like we didn't want to break anything. Additionally, I think we decided early on, no matter where we set the game, if there are ties we can make to familiarity, that's going to be really important because we want people to understand why you're in the wizarding world. It's not you're not not seeing things that you uh, remember. I think when the Fantastic Beast movies, whatever you think of them, I think one of the smartest things they did was introduce Albus Dumbledore because they actually just needed a little better tie to the existing brand so that people had a familiar character that they could look at. So those were all important things to us.
There are some people that would debate you on the Albus Dumbledore bit, but I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, they might debate me on how he was portrayed or what. I don't know if like I think people needed an anchor, right? Like they needed an anchor to make him remember, oh yes, this is the same s- s- content as Harry Potter. Like they just needed a little better tie to it. Uh,
That reminder that
um,
they're still, in the wizarding world.
exactly. Yeah.
Was there like a was it difficult at all transitioning from a game like Disney Infinity to an RPG like Hogwarts Legacy?
Yeah. Because the Disney Infinity brand was more of a family game, right? So it skewed younger. We were an E10 rated game. So you have to imagine that parents are playing the game because they love the characters, but so are 6-year-olds. And with Hogwarts Legacy, we had to come up with like a style guide of like what is our vibe going to be for this game because it was going to be in the AAA space, and honestly, like E10s don't really go over well in the AAA space. And so we actually decided that we wanted to emulate the vibe of book 6, the Half Blood Prince, because that's when things are getting really serious. There's life and death consequences, but there's still room for a little bit of humor, a little bit of magic. We didn't want to quite go to the Deathly Hallows because that is, especially the first half of that book, is like just super depressing, and we wanted something to build towards. And so we firmly set our vibe with the David Yates film Half Blood Prince, so that we could have a little bit of um, enjoyment and a little bit of seriousness, and it would feel like real stakes. So that was sort of our like marching orders going forward early on.
Now that you mentioned like, book 6 and getting that vibe, I think you nailed it.
Oh, thank you.
Now, it's been noticed that there have been changes in Legacy during its development. Like, for example, in the reveal trailer back in 2021, there are scenes in that trailer that do not show up at all in the final product. Is it
Yeah.
normal for those kinds of changes to happen to like the narrative or whatnot in the game itself during its development?
Um, a lot of that was test footage, like that looked really cool. There was, I mean, I know there's a shot in that reveal trailer, and I actually wrote wrote and directed the narration with Jim Dale for that um, trailer, which was like pretty cool because Jim Dale narrated the audiobooks in America. So I wanted to get him, for authenticity. But watching the trailer back as the head of story, I was like, well, what's that from? I've never seen this scene before. There's a scene where there's a guy wearing a skull mask marching towards the foreground to a table, and he looks really ominous and and devious, and everybody's like, "Oh, I bet that's the new villain." I'm like, no, he's not a character in the game at all. But a lot of that was just to set the mood right, just to set the vibes, to give you an idea of like what we were trying to accomplish, and give you a really cinematic presentation. So none of that was like once part of the game and then got cut. It was just all made specifically for that trailer.
It was all mood footage.
Yeah, it was like a mood board, honestly. Yeah. Then now, granted, the game did change a lot of times. Like I think we rewrote the game from scratch maybe 3 times, and that's fun to do when you're making a game that's literally like 25 movie scripts. But but that announced trailer was never really intended to be game footage. It was all rendered out of the PS5 engine, though. I have to say that, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, oh yeah, it was a very beautiful trailer. I'm just remembering like all the people like dissecting all these different parts, like
Oh
like
yeah,
the villain and all the different spell colors and
I had a fake name on Discord, and or not on Discord, on Reddit, and I'd just go onto the Reddit groups and just audit all the gossip that was happening. It was a lot of fun.
I bet a lot of people seem to enjoy the Jackdaw quests, and not just because of like Azkaban and those kinds of spectacles, but also because it shows you a different part of a story that you would not see if you made a different choice. The choice being, what Hogwarts house you chose. How much importance did player choice have in the team's writing, and are you satisfied with what it accomplished, be it for that Jackdaw quest or elsewhere in the game?
There were definitely a lot more choice points that would branch the game in our original pitch, but over time, the production cost of it and the fact that we didn't want to make the game all about if you make this choice it changes the story completely. It got narrowed down to quite a bit, just so that like the house you choose was mostly your branching, and then a little bit with the ending of the game. But I haven't asked permission to use people's names. I would love to give credit to the person that wrote the Jackdaw missions because he worked really really hard on them. But um, without having his permission to mention his name, I don't want to say who it was. But he, I think, found a really brilliant way to um, not break the game by having different stories for each house. They're all the same story. You're just finding out new things about that story depending on which house you go to. And there was little tendrils that played through the rest of the game if you did a certain house. And so I think it was just enough to make people want to replay the game as a different house just to see what else happened. But it wasn't. It didn't break our budget. There was a point where we had about 250,000 lines of dialogue written, and one of our producers came to me and said, "We have a problem, Adrian. We can fit all of your dialogue on the disc, but then we can't put the game on the disc." So we had to shave it down significantly. So I think we went from 250,000 lines, which was mostly like designers coming to us to say, "We want lines for this, we want lines for this, we want lines for this," to 75,000 lines is I think what we shipped with.
That's quite the reduction, but understandable.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a headache.
But one, shout out to that guy who wrote the quest because that was awesome. And two, yeah, it definitely added some replayability because when Ben Snow was talking to me about, oh yeah, I just went through the Azkaban portion of the quest. I'm like, What? Where do you go? Where's Azkaban? Where is
And it's
this?
not the house you think it's going to be either. So
Right.
yeah, but but the reasoning for it is absolutely totally valid.
Right. Yeah. And I definitely appreciated that kind of level of, using the lore to kind of get you there.
Yes.
But speaking of lore, you might be aware of a certain group's, especially Expecto Go, James from Expecto Go's fascination with certain iconic characters like Merlin and Morgan Le Fay and the founders of Hogwarts.
Uh-huh.
Why was it important for Hogwarts Legacy to feature original characters rather than utilizing a cast of memorable people from the franchise?
Well, you think about it this way. As soon as you're featuring characters that are already known and in the franchise with having a specific timeline of events, you spend the entire production dancing around those events so you don't destroy the canon. You if you do a new cast, and again, I was only tangentially involved in this process on this decision, but if you set it in a time when not a lot has been written about the lore, you can your playground's a lot more open. You can be a lot more bold with your storytelling because you're not worried about like, uh-oh, Dumbledore's in school right now, so we have to be careful with that character, or Harry Potter's in school right now, so we can't do anything that's gonna butt into like contradict what Harry Potter's doing at the time. The game then becomes about all of those characters, and we wanted this game to be about your character, so we needed to find a time where we could actually do something unique, where you could give this character a huge story and let it just play out. So yeah, that's the decision there. Like there's definitely like you know, everybody armchair quarterbacks everything, but like, look, do I want to tell a story about the founders that J.K. Rowling is going to be very precious about and want us to do specific things with? Not really. It's not really interesting as a creative person. You want something where you can play around with it a little bit and develop your own lore that matches with the brand. We have ties to Merlin in the game, and there the Hogwarts ghosts are all still there in this timeline. So there's an anchor. Um, you go to Gringotts, like we've done that opening for a long time before we figured out Gringotts was going to be a really nice anchor to the existing legend. You go to Gringotts Bank, goblins are in the game, um, and then I think one of my favorite decisions that I got to be a part of was making the headmaster be Headmaster Black, because he's referenced in the books as being the worst headmaster that Hogwarts ever knew. And I thought, what an absolute counterpoint to Albus Dumbledore that would be. And it was a lot of fun to do that. And then we got Simon Pegg to do the voice, and that was thrilling too. But yeah, I didn't really feel the need to tell stories that were already told. Like that's not super interesting, and it doesn't allow you the chance to be very innovative. I think those stories are already out there.
In your opinion, is there anything challenging about writing for a role playing game? Not just Hogwarts Legacy, but just a role play game in general?
Yeah, when you're making something that's meant to compete with some things like Skyrim, even though that's getting older now, uh, or Baldur's Gate or things like that, you have to you have to allow enough option that the player feels like they can be smart and create their own destiny. And that requires a lot of lines. That requires a lot of writing and a lot of management of narrative, so that you know where the story is going to go if this happens, and where the story is going to get if this happens. And so I think the trickiest part is like um, the amount of play testing that has to be done to make sure that, okay, if they chose this here, then this mission that happens 4 hours later, are they going to say something in that mission that contradicts what they chose back here? Are we going to have to put a conditional coding on there so they can say a different line? And you had to do that a lot. Someone played Witcher 3 for, I think, 3 years, and then did a YouTube video about all the permutations of the different lines you'd hear if you did things in a different order. and it's absolutely ridiculous. After watching that video, I'm actually surprised that that game has been released. They by all intents and purposes, they should still be making that game right now for the amount of options they have. And so it's about finding the options that are going to be significant and powerful, and letting go of the options that are just cosmetic, and really focusing on what's important. How are characters going to care about this? What's going to make it feel like the person holding the controller is touching the world by pushing a B, or choosing a line of dialogue. That's the big challenge with RPG games.
Which quest in Hogwarts Legacy is your favorite?
That's a tough one. I think um I'm gonna change your question a little bit. My favorite quest line
Go for it.
is Poppy Sweeting, and her story of saving the dragon. Like that's probably my favorite quest line. I feel like that started working right fairly early in production, and I'm pretty happy with the writer who did that. That was kind of their time to shine a little bit. This was a person that I hired personally, and they finally got a chance to do something pretty fantastic with their writing ability, and I was really happy with how that turned out.
Yeah, Poppy's line is very adorable with all the fantastic beasts. Despite the fact that I try to make her out to be like some sort of hidden evil demon thing.
Yeah. No, that's not the twist you're gonna find with her. She's just a kind character, and I really like her a lot. Um, you know, I think like most people's favorite character in the game is Sebastian Sallow, and I have a personal connection to him because I invented that character. And so, but don't do a search for fan fiction for Sebastian Sallow, because you will go down a rabbit hole that you'll never recover from. And I'm really happy with what the team did with his character, and the way that he lives in the gray areas of society, and he makes like he's very interesting in that he makes some really solid points about not doing things the way that the world tells them they have to do them. And he's one of those characters where you'll get really enthralled with him, and then you're like, wait a minute, he's asking me to be a horrible person. I've got to like I can't keep hanging out with this guy. But I think it's done so effectively. I really like his storyline, but as far as quest lines go, like Poppy's is my favorite. I didn't name Poppy, and I did name Sebastian. So I guess they both kind of have a little bit of love in my heart.
Oh no, I understand it. I also think it kind of favors Sebastian that his storyline, is kind of the darker tone. A lot of people like to gravitate towards that section of Wizarding World storytelling.
I mean, I think a lot of people are like, but I can change him. I know I can. I just need to know him better. Like, but his storyline sort of sums up the player's journey through the game. Like, what kind of wizard should I be? What kind of witch should I be? And like he offers a really interesting counterpoint that really helps drive that story forward more.
Hey, yeah, I think I see what you're saying because I'm assuming you also wrote for Ominous also, right?
Um, Not as much. Like, it's not really fair to say I wrote Sebastian. I gave the like Cliff Notes beats, and then I gave it to people on my team to flesh out a little bit. And there was specifically two people that were in charge of developing his storyline, and I would just check in every once in a while and like, yep, that's good, or let's nuance that a little bit better. And then I think with Ominous, there was someone on our team that was really advocating to have um, disabilities represented in the game. And we tried for a long time to figure out how to have somebody in a wheelchair, but it just would not work with the way our game worked, because they couldn't figure out how to get them from the top of the stairs to the grand hall and things like that in a way that our budget could manage. And so we landed on having somebody that was experiencing blindness, and we brought in a blindness consultant who was really fantastic that told us like here's how blind people actually are, and here's things not to say, and here's things to support. And we because we really wanted it to feel like everybody in the everybody who played the game felt represented in the game. That was an important thing for at least me, and so the company put the money on the table when I said we need a blind consultant so we can make this character right. They actually said, yes, of course you do. We're going to support you with that, which I think kudos to Warner Brothers for that, big time. But Ominous, I think we struggled for a while with the name and the fact that he's a gaunt. We just like basically. Do you remember in the Fellowship of the Ring movie when Gandalf goes to Minas Tirith and he's looking through the library archives and like millions of books, looking through dusty tomes to find out about the ring. We basically were doing that with Ominous Gaunt to make sure like, can we have a Gaunt? Is this going to work with the timeline? Is there a branch of the family tree where he could actually be going to Hogwarts right now? And once we figured that out, then we were golden. But that and I think the name Ominous was pretty awesome. I didn't come up with that name, but as soon as I heard it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's awesome. I like that a lot. But he's part of the Sebastian storyline, so that team really babied the Ominous stuff through, which I think was really awesome.
The writers, whoever they are, they did a good job of kind of like representing, asking that question of what kind of person do you want to be, not just like a wizard or witch, but you know, are you going to use the means, just the means justify the ends kind of a
Yeah,
situation with like Sebastian, or are you gonna be like, I'm gonna stick to my moral code like Ominous, and those 2 points conflicted.
absolutely. It was beautifully written, I think.
Very beautifully written, and I think it was also very clever having Ominous use this as wand to kind of navigate around the castle. So that was pretty cool and
Yeah,
creative.
that was something we came up with the blind consultant.
Speaking of wands,
Hmm.
if you had the freedom to create an entirely new and original spell for the wizarding world, what would it be?
Oh my gosh. I don't know if I can answer this because every time I used to think of one, like, is there a spell that can do this? And somebody would be like, yeah, I just found it. It's in here, right here. Um, I don't know. Like, there gets a point where you can be too powerful, and and then it's not fun anymore, right? But if I was gonna have a spell for me, I feel like Harry Potter covers it. I just almost said a spell that would transport me to visit my family, but I just apparate. Um, I don't know of anything that she hasn't covered, honestly. Okay, if I'm gonna just be my total Hufflepuff self, I'll say this. I would love a spell that would give people the ability to have empathy for others. If Because we live in a world full of contention and hate and aggressive language, and I would love a spell that would just you could cast it on somebody and their eyes would see how they're making other people feel so that we could just be a little bit healthier as a world. That's probably the spell I'd want.
Well, that's super wholesome.
Oh, I'm a Hufflepuff. What am I going to do?
I will say that I do see a little bit of Isidora Morganach in that, though.
Yeah. Yeah, you can be really you have to use it the right way. Yeah. It's hard. Oh, I was going to tell you one thing when we were talking about the Azkaban stuff. You go to the village of Brockborough when you do the when you do the Hufflepuff line, and the person that wrote that came up with the name Brockborough for the village that you go to. And did you know that Brock is an Old English word for badger,
Huh.
which is the Hufflepuff animal?
That's clever.
There's lots of cool little things like that in the game. Anyway, sorry, back to our regular program.
Oh no, you're good. You're good. I do have some questions from the crows for you.
Okay.
Now, these obviously aren't like vetted by the higher ups or anything. So if you don't feel comfortable answering any of these questions, and judging by a few of them, I suspect You won't be able to.
Yeah, everybody wants to know the juicy answers, and I probably can't give them that. But um, all I say is, if I tell you that I can't answer a question, please email me privately the home address and phone number of the person that submitted the question so that I can harass them. That's all.
You got it.
That's fair, right?
Seems fair. Seems fair. All right. The first one's about Sebastian because, of course.
Okay.
His question is: Sebastian's ending is so open-ended. If there's a second game, will we have closure on Sebastian? Like, will he return from the for the game? Will he have gone to Azkaban, or is he just simply expelled?
I specifically cannot answer that question.
That's understandable. Moving on. Here's a good one. How did the Wizarding World challenge you as a storyteller?
Um, finding our voice, finding the voice we needed to have within the world was important. I feel like Harry Potter's journey was so big that a lot of the themes played out there, and we didn't want to repeat a theme. We wanted to support those themes, but we wanted to make our own space. And so, what finally got us someplace good is early on in the production, we actually were talking about like the game director wanted to give our player a special ability, sort of like Harry had, so it would feel resonant to Harry, but they wanted it to be different than Harry's, and so that was a struggle. And then when we were reading the books, we read a passage that said Hogwarts was created using ancient magic, and we used that for the basis to really start our story. Like, what is ancient magic? We decided it's more primal and emotionally driven than normal magic, and we knew that from talking to the brand that the spell that Harry's mother cast to save his life from Voldemort was ancient magic. It was just an emotional, I love you, Harry, I'm protecting you. And so it came from the root of the character, from their like very soul, or just really emotional. When Harry made the glass disappear at the zoo and the snake escaped, that was ancient magic. And so we had all these little instances where we could actually say like, okay, ancient magic is not a commonly used on purpose magic skill. What can we do with that to make it a thing? And that's when we finally started realizing that we'd have our own voice in the franchise, not by inventing something new, but expanding on something that was in the books as a tease.
I think y'all did it beautifully well.
Thanks. Well, I'm saying thank you, but there's 15 writers and 200 very talented game devs that made it happen. So I was a small wheel in the cog.
From everything from like, the effects to the gameplay application to the story with Isadora Morganach and, the deeper emotional impact of it, I think y'all took that thread and y'all did like the best y'all could with it.
Thank you so much.
But that's just from me. Another one I suspect you might not be able to answer. Will there be a sequel?
Yeah, I can't answer that. But if you made the best-selling game of 2023, what would you do? Like, I can't confirm anything, but like, yeah, if there will be a sequel at some point, there will be an announcement trailer, and I would say just hang tight to see. I don't know. There, it's really funny because everybody wants to know everything that's coming out immediately. We have this real immediacy need in our culture now, but if we if we were making a sequel to something, or if we were doing a specific game and we announced it too early, it wouldn't be ready to show anybody. Like, because all an announcement does is make people have more questions, and so you actually want to know what you're doing before you. So I don't know the answer to that. I don't work for the company anymore, but it wouldn't be a question I would answer anyway.
No, I get what you're saying. You'd have like an Elder Scrolls 6 situation where you see the teaser years before.
Yeah.
I think I've got one more question for
Okay.
you from the crows. I feel like you already answered this one in a way, but
Okay.
he asks, what went behind picking the era of Hogwarts Legacy? Why late 1800s? Why not, after Harry or, medieval Hogwarts or something like that?
Well, I feel like when they ask that question, they want to know why we didn't use the founders, uh, which I've answered. And then why not to put it after Harry's time? Well, then we're gonna deal with the cursed child and all the details that go there. Do I don't want to. I really wanted us to have an open playing field where we could like develop our own style and our own characters and not have to say, and here's what happened to Harry later in life, and here's what happened to Ron later. Like it really would have been a handcuff for us to play the way we wanted to play. And I don't think we would have been able to do ancient magic that way with that timeline. I really don't think that would have worked at all. So 1800s was just this wonderful place where we looked at all of the Pottermore lore and all the resources we had from the company, and there was like a 10 to 12 year period where there was just a vacuum of knowledge. There's not much written there at all. We knew that Phineas Nigellus Black was alive then, and we don't know a lot else about that time zone. So it was a really safe, comfortable place for us to develop a brand new piece of lore for you. And we really did it because we wanted the fans to get brand new content rather than a sequel or a prequel.
No, I get it. It's good that y'all found like a decade, that golden egg to work with.
Yeah. And it's what's crazy is I was getting paid to like research facts on Pottermore. who who gets that kind of job? It's pretty amazing.
Well, Adrian, I've got three final questions for you.
Okay.
These are more for not necessarily for like all the listeners, but more specifically for like, the game developers that are kind of out in the audience that are just sort of like starting off looking for advice or whatnot, even though they might not know it
You
yet.
bet.
You're kind of my guinea pig in that regard.
Okay. Well,
So because you're like my first like game dev here,
honestly, I
so
answer questions like that all the time in elevators classes because when you take my class, you get a half-hour Zoom call with me to strategize about your career. So you're probably not going to ask me anything that I haven't answered 1,000 times. So this will be easy.
actually I wanted one more question
Yeah.
about the elevator class. So what do you cover specifically in the class, and what do you offer beyond the learning material? Because I was looking at it and I saw the Zoom call, also saw like a letter of recommendation for like the top 10 students or something like that.
Yeah. Um, that honestly, you take the class. I try to coach you through the starters of getting your career in order and lead you towards you know entry level jobs. And honestly, the people that are in my class, I actually have an alumni group on LinkedIn that's private. And so once you take the class, you're pretty much stuck with me forever. If you need anything ever, you can just message me and I'll help you out. I feel like somebody did that for me at the start of my career, and I'm gonna be happy to pay that forward a little bit. So the what you get in the class is a really good overview of what it means to be a narrative designer for video games, and then I just give you resources to lead you continuing on that path. I think people that take the work seriously can within 6 months or a year get get their first entry level job. But we go over things like even in the last class we go over like how to interview, how to have a social media presence, how to do a resume and a portfolio and things like that. But we go over a lot of player autonomy, screenwriting format, how to write good dialogue and not clunky dialogue, how to do a game pitch, and how to do like copywriting, like mission logs and object inventory items and descriptions and things like that. So it's kind of like a I could do I have 12 lessons. I could do 24 easily, but the 12 lessons give you the overview of each of the sections that I think you need to know to get into the industry.
That's pretty cool. If you could go back in time and meet yourself before starting a career in game development, what advice would you give yourself?
Don't sweat the small stuff. When I was early on in my career and I hadn't really made a name for myself yet, I stressed every time something didn't go the way I thought it needed to go. A lot. I stressed a lot. I'm Hufflepuff. It's gonna happen. But I would tell myself like there's things you need to just let go. There's things that aren't important. You need to focus on the important quality things and let everything else go. If you can't change it, don't stress about it. That led in part to my near death experience a couple of years ago, and I would go back in time and tell myself, don't sweat the small stuff. Now, having said that, I don't have regrets in my life because I feel like I really like who I am right now, and I really like the things I've got to work on. And if I went back in time and changed something about who I am, I may not have come on this journey. I may have not had the opportunities to do the things that I've done. So, um, I would rather think of some like talking to myself now. If I could go back to now and talk to myself. So I don't think I'd want to change anything about who I was earlier in my career, other than I might come to me as a little kid, because I grew up in a little tiny farming community in Idaho where the main job was potato farmer. And when I told my parents I wanted to be a cartoonist, they look at me like, "Oh no, he's going to be homeless the rest of his life." Um, I would love to go back in time and say, "Hey, don't worry about it. You're gonna get to work at Disney like you dreamed." Because that felt so impossible to me when I was a little kid. The chances that I could actually work for Disney was like it was ridiculous to even have that dream to me. But I would go back and say, don't give up on your dreams, kid. It's gonna work out. It's gonna work out. But, again, I don't really have any regrets in my life. I just have adjustments that I make when I'm wiser.
So, what advice would you give to someone trying to break into the game industry today?
Okay, so I do this test with my elevator students a lot. I'll do it here too. So if you want to be a game developer, close your eyes for a second and imagine that starting right now, you for the rest of your life, you can never be a game dev. If that leaves a pit in your stomach, then you're doing the right thing. Don't give up on that dream. It's hard. You have to be very passionate about this in order to make it work. You have to be willing to put yourself out there, take criticism and feedback, and not in a rude way, and really pay your dues. I think a lot of times kids come out of school and they feel entitled that they deserve a job, and that's not true. That nobody's entitled to a job ever. And I think if you can honestly say that this is the reason that you were put on Earth was to make games for a living, then be be patient, be driven, and be passionate, and you'll do fine.
What is something you do to relax when faced with a stressful part of a project? For example, crunch, creative dispute, general anxiety.
Crunch is hard because crunch doesn't really allow you the opportunity to relax because you're stuck at work. But there's an interesting thing that happens if you're sharing the office with a friend, which I've been fortunate enough to do. You have a mental breakdown and you just start making up stupid jokes and laughing with each other. And we, a friend and I had like a 2 hour conversation where one of us was Tonto from the Lone Ranger and the other one was Bane from uh, the Dark Knight Rises. And we were just talking back and forth to each other, and it was stupid and ridiculous, and nobody knew why we thought it was funny, but we were just blowing off steam, honestly. Um, I don't drink, but a lot of people would go out to on Friday to a bar and uh, drink a little too heavily, and then come back to work and have a really fun afternoon on Fridays. But when you don't do that, you have to find other ways to do it. So crunch is a specific thing. Other things that stress me out, I have to center myself a little bit and say, you know what? This is just a temporary situation. This isn't my whole life. This doesn't define who I am as a person. And I just go, okay, I need to make a change right now. So I'll do the same thing I do with writer's block. Like, you know, say like, oh, the new Planet of the Apes movies is in the matinee. Like this is a personal experience that just happened barely. Uh, I was stuck on a story and it was stressing me out, and I just looked on my phone and said that there was a showing of the new Planet of the Apes movie in a half an hour, and I thought, you know what? That sounds like a really nice way for me to not think about this for 2 hours. So I just turned off my computer, got in my car, and went to the theater and ate some popcorn and turned off my brain for 2 hours and just watched something fantastic. And that helps me so much. I think when we stop enjoying what we're doing for a living, there's a problem, and you really need to assess why that's happening. If it's a temporary problem, just come up with a temporary solution. But if you find that that's more often than not what's going on, that you feel stress about what you're doing more than you feel happiness, then you really need to assess, are you doing the right thing? Is this the company you should be working for? Are you in a toxic environment? Do you need to make some changes? So it's about constantly reassessing your goals in life. And I guess that probably feels like pretty vague advice, but that's the best advice I can offer.
Well, Adrian, thank you for being here. It's been great talking to you, great getting to know more about you. And once again, thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm glad I was in a position where I could do an interview.
Yeah, me too. And hopefully I'll get to see you walking around catching a movie in Salt Lake City next year sometime.
Yeah, hit me up when you're at SLCC, and I'll be at the South Campus. So yeah, just let me know.
And to the rest of our crows out there, be sure to check out Adrian's game writing course on Elevator. Again, that's ELVTR. And be sure to check out his website. I'll be posting links down in the descriptions. And be sure to subscribe for our next episode where Adrian here does the Ice Bucket Challenge. Up to it? No?
It's not gonna happen.
Not gonna.
No.
Oh, okay, fine.
Wait until it's 110 outside, and then we'll maybe talk about it.
Maybe. Okay. Actually, our next episode will be with James from Expecto Go and Ben Snow and I, where we will be speculating what a Hogwarts Legacy sequel might look like. Ooh.
Oh, interesting.
And
I'll listen to that episode and laugh and laugh and laugh.
And given that it's going to be at the end of September, I suspect there might be some new stuff to consider. But maybe. Until then, though, be safe, be well, be kind. Bye bye.